And what's up, STS Nation? Apologies for the slight delay. We're trying to get Gil on of the duo Phil, the dynamic duo of Phil and Gil, but we'd like to welcome you to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, where we bring you the best guests in the true crime genre. I'm coming to you tonight, so hopefully there won't be too many technical difficulties from high atop a skyscraper here in Manhattan, 46 floors above the ground. If it is Sunday night, it will now be time to get your true crime fill with the dynamic duo of Phil Waters and Jonathan Gilliam. And as we speak, Gilliam is trying to get online with StreamYard, which is more complicated than it looks. I'll tell you a little bit about Phil, who you've seen on the show before. He's one of the most respected detectives in all of the United States of America. He spent decades in law enforcement, becoming an expert at obtaining criminal confession. He spent 23 years working as a homicide detective in the Houston Police Department, investigating more than 400 homicide cases. So if you know more than Phil, you probably don't. He's also a Marine and owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations. And he started in the show The Interrogator, which he preferred would have been called The Interview Room, but it's never too late. And Jonathan Gilliam, who we hopefully will get on, is a career public servant. He is a member of the Navy, became a Navy SEAL. He was a FBI special agent, a federal air marshal. He's done it all, and he has books out. One, No More, and I see him here. Here we go. There he is. No More by Jonathan Gilliam, as well as the children book, The Adventures of Team Little Big. So we've got our full lineup here. We're looking forward to this Sunday night live episode tonight. Sadly, however, marks 9 weeks since the heinous quadruple homicide of those 4 young college students in Moscow, Idaho. As you know, I always like to start the show off by remembering those students. So let us never forget those young lives lost way too soon. Madison Mogan, 21. Kaylee Gonzalez, 21. Xana Nodal, 20. Ethan Chapin, 20. Let their memories be a blessing. Meanwhile, police say the killer is 28-year-old Brian Christopher Koberger. We want to remind everyone that Brian Koberger is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Quick programming note. This Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time and odd time, we're bringing you one of London, England's best-known therapists. She's going to talk about the emotional side of both the Idaho 4 case as well as Ana Walshe missing. Her name is Dr. Linda Papadopoulos. You don't want to miss her, and she'll be teamed up with Dr. Shiloh. She is a forensic profiler of the Not So LA Confidential podcast. She is fantastic. That'll be live Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. On Twitter, we're podcast STS. Man, I'd love the action of Gilliam, 100,000 Twitter followers. You can support us on Patreon. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, and my 8-year-old daughter, as she likes to say, please smash that subscribe and like button. Gets the algorithm cooking. So start off with a little back and forth between Jonathan, Phil, and myself, and dig right into your questions, which are pouring in as we speak. But Phil, you're going to get mad at me for this first question, but any closer to a motive in this Idaho 4 case? Do we have any understanding to why this guy decided to allegedly kill 4 innocent college students?
You're kind of chopping out on me there, Joel. Do I understand the question about the motive behind the killings?
Yeah, motive, correct.
Well, I don't think anything has come out yet, that I haven't seen anything. And I think that's yet to be revealed. I think I've said on maybe a couple of our previous get-togethers here that may be used as a bargaining chip later on. I know that the Goncalves family, they do not want to see him enter a plea. Although I did hear the judge say when she was at the arraignment in Idaho that she was talking about there were only two punishments, whether he pled or whether he was found guilty by a jury. I think that was my understanding, that either the death penalty in either case, in either situation, he could be found guilty by a jury and receive the death penalty, or he could plead to the charge and still receive the death penalty. I guess that would be something that the judge would rule on. But I think that perhaps in just listening to the defense attorney that was in Pennsylvania, of course, he was saying things that are completely in line with what a defense attorney would say. So my sense is that this is the one great unknown, and it always is in homicide cases, is the why. And so my sense is that it may be used as a bargaining chip later on to get the death penalty off the table. So, good evening, Jonathan, by the way.
How are you, brother?
Well, I'm doing better than I deserve, brother.
Hey, how are you guys? I know people are having trouble with me. Are you hearing me okay? Or is it really poor?
No, your reception is very poor.
Poor.
Or your broadcast is very poor.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to do much about this. I'm so sorry. I'll tell you what. Are you guys hearing each other okay?
Yeah. Are you streaming? Is somebody else streaming something on your wireless? Because that may have something to do with it. Just from my detective skills.
Not that I'm aware of.
That or it's the NSA, one or the other.
Let me do what let me try to bounce out and come right back in, okay, guys? But you stay. And let me see if there's a question I can get you guys. Otherwise, we might have to do this once I'm back on the mainland.
Are you still there, Phil?
I'm still here, yeah.
Okay.
You guys want to take this question? I'm going to try to come back out and go back in.
Let me read this. Seriously. Do you think if you didn't? Well, actually, that's an interesting question, because right now, I don't remember where it was. I think it was Brazil, that a serial killer was just released. I don't know if you saw that, Phil. He had been in jail for like 20 or 30 years and was just released.
Oh, yeah.
So that will be a good test. I don't actually know of any, not saying that that Brian Kohlberger is a serial killer, but like we talked, the potential is there that he's killed before. Yeah. But I don't know if I remember seeing anybody who killed multiple times or even once, but on this level, that was ever let out once they were in. I don't remember it, not in my lifetime.
No, and I don't think I would have to say that even going back to a guy like which was a mass killing, was what was his name? Gary Speck, that
right.
killed the nurses with a knife. And I want to say, from that guy forward, the more modern day guys, Ted Bundy, the serial killer guys and all that.
John was saying if he's acquitted, I don't remember any case where there was this much evidence piled up just from the affidavit that they were acquitted.
Well, what I was going to say was that I think most of those guys have all said, in fact, maybe the lesser knowns, at least in my experience, has been that you let me out, I'm going to kill again. They're pretty brazen about what they're going to take up where they left off. So I can't imagine. again, innocent until proven guilty and all that good stuff. And I can't imagine, just based on, I agree with you, just based on what they revealed in the affidavit, which is not anything near the total scope of the evidence that they have.
Yeah.
And they're still waiting for stuff to come back from processing. So the fact that he would get, I can't imagine the technicality that would arise that he would be acquitted.
I mean, just on what they showed in the affidavit, I mean, it is just, if they had that alone, right, and they had no other evidence, from your experience in all the trials that you've dealt with do you think that would be enough to get a conviction?
Well, you never know what a jury's going to do, but I mean, and that's assuming that this goes to a jury trial. I mean, I guess, I don't know in Idaho, I know in Texas, he could request a bench trial, that they could just do away with the jury and leave it up to the judge solely. And they may, I would think they're going to ask for a change of venue right off the bat. I don't know where in the heck they're going to think they can go. That I guess there is some place that they could go where they would feel like they would get a more impartial jury pool. But and they may take the option of, I had a capital murder suspect that did that, went to a bench trial, and it was that's kind of worrisome, because now we have one person that's going to decide the fate of that case. But
I think what's interesting about this case is that no matter where it's tried, I think the people want to make sure that he's the guy. So they would be interested in the evidence. And I think out of all the cases I've seen recently, that people really want to get to the bottom of this, I don't know what. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, I was going to say, yeah, I agree. I mean, the why is always the big question, right? And in this case, and we've discussed this. Why would he do this? And I know that I've talked about, there's 3 reasons people kill: sex, drugs, or money. There's no drugs involved in this thing. At least it doesn't appear. There's no money involved in this. So, and when I say sex, I'm talking about a sexual component. I'm not talking about that he went in there for the purpose of sexual assault and that kind of thing. And my wife even asked me that. She said, "Well, do you think that's what he was doing?" And I said, No. But there's something here in his psyche. There's something here that's got a sexual component to it, because these are attractive young people. The girls are very attractive. The young man is a handsome young man, and so they have a lot of things going for them that perhaps this evildoer did not. And he's coming, I think when it comes out, he's going to have come in contact with someone here. I don't know if it's going to be the 2 girls that were working at, Maddie and Kaylee, that were working at this vegan restaurant. I think I read somewhere, but he's had contact with them in some setting, and something that happened there, based on what we know about him now, set him off. I mean, I don't if it's
I don't know what Heather's talking about here. I don't know about this possible connection of a vet who was shot. I don't know anything about that.
Can you hear me now? Are you hearing my audio?
I hear your audio.
It's a little better, yeah.
A little better. You guys are going to be running the show tonight, but so this has to do with that SWAT situation. There's some theory that he was involved. I'm going to keep popping. I'm going to listen to you guys, and I'm going to pop up the questions, and we'll go till like 10, and I'll just be here in the background, guys.
Okay. You should put a picture, just snap a shot of your face and throw it up there where the little icon is.
Yeah, put your we need to see
for that.
You need to see your.
I'll let you guys go, and I'm going to pick up another question here for you.
I've always been asked, like I heard it. Yeah, I mean, I wrote a book on this, actually. Sheep No More: The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, which you can see there. I mean, look, the reality is, I said something that got a lot of traction on Twitter, where people, all these sleuths, kind of debating back and forth about this. But if you want to, if a person is going to be proficient at killing, and Phil's seen all these murders and all these homicides. Killing is not necessarily a difficult thing. If you can somehow cause a person to bleed out or disrupt the electrical system in the body, that person's going to die. But to kill efficiently without getting caught, which was clearly, his not his motive, but it was definitely the outcome that he was wanting in this, the killer in Idaho. And that's typically with people most people don't want to get caught for killing, but there are people who are what I call overt attackers, who they perform mass killings, and they want to be caught. They want to be seen as dominant. But if a person is trying to be an efficient killer, they're going to train in the art of killing. And so, that's why a lot of the times you see serial killers who kill animals first. It's not just desire. They're also honing their ability, and it's not just using a knife or a gun, but it's their emotional ability. Even though somebody may be psychopathic, they may get so satiated that they lose the ability to think straight. The adrenaline is so strong that they become weak, and there may be moments of guilt within there. So the same thing goes with somebody who's trying to protect themselves. In order to protect yourself, you have to look at your life in sectors. You don't look at, I need to make my family safer. You got to look at your family from the time they wake up in the morning to the time they all disperse. Do they go to school, go to work, somebody stays home, to the point they come back, when you go out, when you're home at night versus home in the mornings, in the evenings versus when you're sleeping at night. These are all different sectors of your life. And if you look at each sector and say, if I was going to attack this sector, why would I attack? What would be my motivation? Am I going to rob the place? Are you in a public area, like a concert where terrorists may be lurking? So you look at each sector and say, why would I attack this? Who historically carries out those type of attacks? Where does it happen? When does it happen? And how do they carry these out? And once you start asking those questions from the attacker's point of view, you can understand an avenue of approach that you would take and the vulnerabilities that you would exploit. And so I used these and was trained kind of in these tactics as a Navy SEAL. And so we looked at everything offensively. But we would also ask ourselves, if these people were going to, what is my vulnerability as an attacker that could get me caught? So we go back and forth, attacker, defender. And so when I went into law enforcement, I went straight from the SEAL teams to sitting on a plane undercover, looking for bad guys, trying to act like a normal person. But I consistently had to ask myself, why would I attack this flight in particular? Who typically carries out these attacks? Where would it happen? When would it happen? And what avenue of approach and vulnerabilities would they exploit? So I would go back and forth. And then when I got into the FBI, well, before that, I was doing contracting. That was my job. Literally did threat assessments all over the country for Homeland Security and for high value targets, churches, synagogues, malls, schools, and other important venues, stadiums and arenas, tall buildings. And so once I got in the FBI, I was in the criminal side of the house. It helped there. But once I got to the position where I applied and started running the special events in New York City, every major event or incident in the nation, I was in charge of liaisoning with other law enforcement and private entities, doing the threat assessments, the operation orders. And I would do that constantly, looking at it from the attacker's perspective and then the defender's perspective. So I would go back and forth.
Yeah. Jonathan, to Kent's question there, I don't mean to interrupt you here, but to Kent's question there, which was, can you train to defend your family, that kind of a thing, or is it just something you do naturally or something you don't do?
As an attacker,
I would say the answer to his question about specifically about training is yes. I mean, you would, if you go to the trouble to go get, let's just say, a carry permit as an example, and if you go to a good trainer one of the first things they're going to tell you is that if you're going to use that weapon, you better be on board with killing someone. You want to use the weapon to eliminate the threat as quickly as possible in a permanent way. So, yes, you can train in that way. And what you were talking about, Jonathan, I know through my 33 years in law enforcement, of course, I was in the Marines and so forth and so on, but my training in law enforcement, and I taught street survival. I was on a SWAT team. I did those things. And that training, the first question that I was taught to ask in every place I go is the what if. So every restaurant I enter, anytime I get in the car, and I still do it to this day, I play the what if game.
Mm-hmm.
What if this happens? What will my actions be? And I think about those things, and that's what you're talking about. You start to, you program yourself
mm-hmm.
to think in that way. That's why when I go into a restaurant, I sit in the corner with my back to the wall, or try to get in an area where I can see what's happening in front of me, and then play the what if game. I do it in church. I mean, I mean, everywhere I go, because that has been part of my training along the way, and that's what. In answer to Kent's question, I mean, yes,
yeah.
you can train that way. I think in most cases, whether when people have their domicile invaded, that the natural instinct to protect your family and your property, I think that kicks in. For most people, I think that kicks in a natural way.
Mm-hmm. When so the one thing when we were doing all these threat assessments, and as I went through and doing the special events, what became quite apparent was that as an attacker, I'm just learning what you in your home already know, or you in your school, or you in the facilities that you go to or run. I'm having to learn the vulnerabilities and the avenues approach that will best get what I need. And so what that tells you is the people out there is that I'm trying to get your knowledge. So if you use my mindset to relook at your knowledge, that is the beginning of any training. Then if you get a concealed weapons carry permit, you'll know where it's most likely you're going to have to use it and where you won't. You'll know if you go to like Waffle House at 3 a.m. in Nashville, that happened in 2018. It's one of the only soft targets in that city at 3 a.m. And a guy walks in naked with a gun and shoots up the place. So if you're aware that you're sitting in a soft target at 3 a.m., then you're more likely to be aware and be ready to act, not just react. So yeah, that is the beginning of any training. If you go get a gun, or if you want to protect your family, but you don't increase your awareness and your ability to think like that, you're starting off completely wrong, and you'll never get to that place where you can play the what if game, where you're flipping that switch, attack,
right.
defend, attack, defend.
Right.
So yeah, it can be done very easily.
Well, this next question here about, and again, I'm going to refer to him as the evildoer. I won't speak his name. I'll leave that up to you, Jonathan. But the calm demeanor shows guilt or not. Most people, if they were wrongly accused, would be very upset. He's just so calm, doesn't look bothered by it all. Well, I don't know that his calm demeanor is simply, I think inside, especially when he walked into this last arraignment and he had scratches on his face, it looks like he may have had a little bit of interaction with the population there in the jail. And so I don't think his demeanor is necessarily different than what he normally acts like. I mean, I've listened to him when the judge was asking him questions. Do you understand? And he was very solid in his answers that he did. I didn't detect any kind of defensive response. I didn't detect it was kind of like O.J. Simpson, right? Absolutely.
Well, that's typical. That's typical for a narcissist who has Machiavellian tendencies and who is psychopathic and doesn't have a lot of empathy. They I mean, you look at the guy with the just dropped her name, the woman that's missing in Connecticut that they think her husband, Ana Walshe. So that this guy shows the same type of, he's smiling at cameras. He doesn't act like he looks bothered or worried at all. So these people don't feel the same thing that you and I do when it comes to emotions. And they truly believe in a lot of ways that they're smarter than everybody else, and that they don't get worried like we do because they're predators. And, you look at, predators just think differently, and they don't get as wrapped up in the emotional guilt or worry. Their concern typically is, once they are faced with this problem, how can I outsmart the other person because I'm obviously smarter than they are. And so they think differently.
I had a little bit different take on Brian Walsh, the smiling coming out of the jail and that kind of thing. Didn't appear to me to be one of confidence. That appeared to me to be, in the interview room, we would call that inappropriate laughter, inappropriate emoting of humor. And I read that as being he was uncomfortable that, wow, I may have busted this thing in a whole lot of different ways. I wasn't as clever as I thought I was. And so, yeah, I read his smiling in a little bit different way. It looked to me like he was just very self-conscious, and the body will do things, as you know, that we cannot control. Even if he had wanted to control this smile, this inappropriate smile or laughter, I don't think he had the ability. Well, I know he didn't. He didn't have the ability to control it. So he comes out, he sees the cameras, he's right there. They're doing what they call the perp walk. And that's his response. So that is his physiological response to the situation that he's in, which was to kind of do this, this little smile, smirk thing, like, holy crap, I'm in the middle of it.
He also shows when he was sitting in the courtroom, standing in the courtroom behind the glass, the look as he's looking back and forth was as though he's in total interest of what's happening and understanding of how this process is working. But his emotions still aren't. They're it's almost like an ego type of response rather than an emotional response. I don't really see he's not tormented, he's not distraught. Yeah,
you're talking about Walsh. Yeah, I kind of read that as being he was looking for a way. How the heck do I get out of here? That's the way I kind of interpreted what he was doing. Is like, holy
he ain't
crap,
going nowhere.
Yeah, how am I getting out of this thing? How am I get out of this mess? I can't believe these people aren't believing my bull crap.
So let's see, Adam CRF 188. What are your opinions on the van shoe prints in the affidavit? Do you think that was there because more is to come? Seems significant to be in there, but vague. I just don't see how there could be one footprint and no more. But again, affidavits are written like, we write 302s like that. That's when we write our report in the FBI. Affidavits are written in a similar way. They're vague for a reason. And it gives enough evidence in an affidavit to show probable cause. Although this one, I think, went way beyond that. But if they could just, if they can just show that there's one footprint, then that's all they need to show. They don't need to say that they let out, somewhere. They don't need to say that in the affidavit.
No. That's just another affirmative link. Yeah.
So I don't know. We don't have anything else there on that. But it's not. It's vague for a reason, I guess you could say. To Phil, I'll ask this of you, Phil. To Phil, not about the case, but you're sitting back in the corner of a restaurant. Isn't that making you furthest away from the exit and last to get out in the event of a problem?
Exactly.
There's always two ways out in a restaurant.
Hey, first in, last out. There you go.
Yeah. It also is. If it's somebody that comes in, I think you saw this in these mass shootings where they go into a grocery store, for instance, like up in Buffalo. The people at the very front, it happens so fast that you don't have time to respond. So if you can, the further you are in the back, the more, and you still have to observe like where the kitchen. You're in a restaurant. There's going to be an exit from the kitchen. So the further in the back you can get, the more response time you're going to have. And when you're up front, though, these things happen so fast. I don't think most people realize how fast it takes to kill somebody with a knife, and I don't think they realize how fast these attacks with guns sometimes happen.
Well, and for somebody like us, it's all about field of vision. It's we want to see as wide a scope as we can see. And again, to just what you're talking about is if that person comes in at one, I mean, look at these church shootings. I sit in the sanctuary and I sit in a specific place. And when I am in there, I'm looking at who comes in and out. Of course, I'm looking at their hands the minute they walk in the door, that kind of thing. So it's just you cannot, and you know this, you cannot turn this off. It's a constant. So you got to be where you can see where it's going, and then what your approach is going to be if something does happen, where they come in from, and how are you going to approach it. So,
first court date, he smiled at his attorney as he sat next to her. Second court appearance, he didn't look at her one time. I thought that, I don't know what that has to do with, but I thought it was very interesting how, I mean, I was on Dr. Phil's show with Mercedes Callan, I think that's how you say her last name. And she, I asked her before we even went on, what is the chance that his attorney would be a female with blonde hair? His court-appointed attorney would be a female with blonde hair. And she said, well, you never know. Defense attorneys are notorious for doing things, and who knows if she dyed her hair to make it an appearance to the judge that he's comfortable next to somebody, or an upcoming jury. I don't know. I doubt that's the case, but you never know.
Well, I've never been a believer in coincidence. That's all I'll say.
Marie P says the Walsh guy looks like he just got woke up.
I'd agree. Yeah.
So did his house. His house, you could tell he didn't take care of his house from the outside. It was, it's a very dirty house. It's never been. Looks like it's in a nice neighborhood, but has no upkeep as far as power washing, the siding, and all that stuff. It was just very dirty, which says a lot. Go ahead, Phil. You can get this one.
Well, he just looks like a slob. Yeah. What do you think? Likely may take a plea deal before June. I would be surprised if that's the next court date, and I would be surprised if he was even offered a plea at this stage of the game. And I don't know that. I mean, you never know what's going to happen here. There's no telling what will happen now in the coming months, but I would say it's remotely it's possible, but I just don't see that happening before June.
What I want to know is, Joel, are you still on with us or no? I don't know if he is. I was going to look up at Joel Waldman.
I am still here with terrible Wi-Fi, so just lingering. I'll throw some questions.
I was gonna put a picture of you up here like this, just so I could have you next to my shoulder. But when I looked up your name, this guy came up. So I don't know. Have you been doing roids and collecting giant dogs? Because
I need to get on that.
All right. What do you think the likelihood is that BK may take a plea deal before June? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you one thing I do see with this guy. If he follows in line with people like Ted Bundy or BTK or the Green River Killer, these types of people, once they realize that there's no way that they can get out of this, that their goose is cooked, a lot of the times they'll start talking in order to make a plea deal, but then they start playing a game of saying, well, I think I killed 15 people, and I know for sure I can take you to C3, and then they slowly release the rest of the information because they now they're getting satiated by that game. Once they realize that there's no way they're ever getting out, this game is going to become the satiation of their ego. And that's what's interesting. Bernie Madoff, he went to prison, and he immediately made this transition to where he was the guru of people's finances and taxes in prison. So that's what these people do. They don't look at life the same way that we do. And if they get pushed into a corner, they're going to find someone in that corner and convince them to worship them or manipulate them or something like that.
Well, they're survivors, but in this evildoer's case, you know, there is a hierarchy, there is a pecking order in prison. Now, let's just say, for the sake of the discussion, he gets the death penalty. Then he's gonna be isolated anyway. But if not, and even in the jail setting, I would not be surprised if they have him isolated. I think this has gotten such notoriety in these young people. He's probably not a fan favorite where he is right now. So
don't you think, Phil, if those cuts on his face were a result of something that happened in the jail, wouldn't that have gotten out in the news?
You would think so, but I mean, there's got to be some explanation unless they were self-inflicted.
Yeah. So Jennifer Coleman writes, and I think this is a great question. I wonder if the actual kill was so soothing to him, pent up years of feeling void. I doubt he concentrated on crime scene perfection, which I think that's probably what happened. You know, whenever we get what we want in life, that's when we are at our worst tactically. You know,
I think he prepared for it.
Yeah,
I think he is, you know, and this is just my opinion, just based on the scene and so forth and so on. I think he planned for it. And if we go with what the witness said, that he's wearing a mask and black clothes, so he planned for it. But he made some really rookie mistakes. I think that he thought when he did what he did, when he walked out of there, I think he thought, man, I pulled it off. And then when he realized that sheath was missing and he went back, that's when I think that maybe it started to fall apart for him. But I don't.
How many in these cases that you've done, Phil? Because I know I've seen this throughout my career that that these individuals, we talked about this a little bit last time about the God wink, or when God makes something happen. But in all your cases, can you think back on specifics where you're like, I mean, like in this case, he drops his sheath basically on top of one of the people that was murdered. Like if they would have found that, like, I don't know, in a bathroom drawer, it might have been a little bit different. But the fact they found it right there, and in your case that you worked, how many of these cases where something was like, you got to be kidding me that this guy screwed up this bad, where it like just lays it right out? This is who did it.
Well, I don't know if I could go back to one specific piece of evidence. I can think of one case where this guy walks into this house. He's going to, for the purpose of sexually assaulting this woman, and he stomps her to death, and blood all over the place. But in the process of it, apparently she had cut his right below his eye, got a fingernail on him. And we were going through this was a case that went on for months, and we weren't directed where we needed to be. But when we finally got there, she had she had on some shorts, some culottes that were pink, a bright pink color. And there was a single drop of blood right on the culotte, which was weird. It was out of place. Now I know he didn't plant that, but we DNA'd that, processed that single drop, and it comes back to our suspect. So that was pretty cool. That's one of those things like, holy crap, she clipped him, and that one drop of blood, bam, there it is. And it puts him there. So those kinds of things. But in this particular case, I think, to use your word, when he's in the process of it and he's getting that urge, that whatever that satiation is that he needs at that moment. Look, it's just, if you've ever been involved, and I know you have, but and I have, if you've ever been involved in a shooting, that stuff they talk about, tunnel vision, ears closing off, focus, you're so focused on what's happening in front of you, that really happens. And I don't think it's any different for anybody else, because we're all of that human element about us. So I think in this case, once he was in the midst of it and he's going after it, I think he gets tunnel vision and everything going on around him is a blur. His ears close off, so he doesn't hear, the little witness that was there that saw him leave. I don't think he ever saw her. I mean, she may have been positioned behind it. I mean, the way it's kind of phrased is she may have been behind a door looking out. But I think he was so focused at that point on getting out of there, he didn't realize that he had dropped that sheath. So it makes me wonder, he wasn't wearing it. That's kind of the rookie mistake there. He doesn't wear it. He brings it in. He's either carrying it or he's got it stuck in his pocket. And so when he draws the blade out comes the sheath, and he ends up leaving it there. So I think that was, you call them God winks. I think there was some divine intervention on that thing.
I think if people want to understand what you're talking about, that tunnel vision, try watching a show. I know guys can always, I'm sure women can feel the same thing, but you'll always hear guys saying that, I was trying to watch this game or do this thing, and my wife or my girlfriend or somebody was trying to carry a conversation, or parents that have kids and the kid's saying something and you're trying to do this, you won't even hear what these people say. Like, if you're so focused on this, right at the time when there's about to be a touchdown and they're saying something, you'll be so focused on this that you won't be able to hear what they're saying. So imagine that magnified, by a dozen times, where this guy's sneaking in. He's in the process of murdering. He's getting satiated, and his vision is so tunneled that he literally could put down the sheath and not even realize it at the same time. And the other thing I thought about, because I didn't say it earlier, is that there may have been a sexual connection to this, and the possibility that he went back not only to get his sheath, but to also, do something sexual could have been there. Because if he could have gone back and not gotten caught, he very well may have, because it appears as though his attack was disrupted. It doesn't sound like he was done and then he just casually snuck out. It sounds like, whether it was the roommate or whether it was Ethan or Zana confronting him when he came back downstairs, whatever it was, it appears that something stopped that forward momentum.
Well, when I talk about the sexual component here,
the
example that I will use is Carla Faye Tucker. So Carla Faye Tucker, Houston case, she used a pickaxe to kill a couple of people, and she has been rehabilitated, so she's where she is. But she said that when she was interviewed about what she had done, and she's using a full-size pickaxe, and she struck the female. It was a guy and a gal, and she hit the female so hard with the pickaxe that it went through her chest and pinned her to the bed. And Carla Faye said, of course, they were all, cranked up on meth, but she said that every time she struck the woman and struck the man with the pickaxe, that she had an orgasm. So when I
Wow.
talk about a sexual component to this thing,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that they're in there for the purpose of sexual assault, but in some way it satisfies some sort of a need of the flesh, and that's why they're doing this thing.
Which is interesting about this, because if it's a rage or a crime of passion, once the people targeted are killed, most of those types of killings will stop. They don't continue to kill, and in this case, it just seems well, first of all, we don't see any relationship between these people, but it just seems as though in this case the killing methodically kept going, and it very well could have had a sexual connotation. I really do think that desires, whether we outwardly feel like it's sexual or we feel that it's mechanical, it comes down to the same area in your mind and in your mental process of a desire.
Yeah, the flesh, right?
Yeah.
The libido. I mean, that's where it
Yeah.
comes down to. And I wonder too about the killing of Ethan and Xana. They were in bed together. So here you've got, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here that just leads me to believe that that was the component here in that flesh way that that got him. And this is one of these guys. He does this mass killing. He may not have. This may have been it for him, unless he felt like he needed to be satisfied or satiated, to use your word, Jonathan, again and again and again. But this may have been a one-off. He went in there and he did it, and he would never have done it again if not for the fact that he got caught.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting with narcissists, because there is that component to a lot of these people, is that if you've known somebody who's a narcissist, dated somebody that's a narcissist, their biggest mistake is that they get wrapped up in themselves this is after the attack, where their image of who they project it's all made up. So they do have a deep seated hatred of themselves. We see the fact of what he went through. There's now, I wish I had it right in front of me. There was where he posted something years ago where he said that there's nothing in him, like he's numb. He doesn't feel anything. He's talking about how he interacts with his parents and he feels nothing. So this person will create a persona, and then when he goes back to school and is working after the attacks, he probably feels more powerful, and that's why his personality didn't look like he was terrified because he got caught. His personality, all the people around him, was that he kind of became like more confident and kind of quiet, and like he just had this confident air about him because he feels like that, So anyway,
well, the question before this one was regarding why do these cases take so long to go to trial? Well, there's a lot of different reasons why that happens. I mean, I've had homicide cases in fact, I've got some homicide cases now that are pending that have been going on for, I want to tell you, 6 years, waiting to go to trial. So there's a lot of factors that determine the timing, and a lot of it just has to do with the number of cases that are pending, type of murder cases. I don't think in Moscow, Idaho, though, that county, I don't think that this is going to be a 2 or 3 or 4 year process. I think they'll, first homicide they've had in 7 years, right? So I think this is going to move the process. I mean, people need to be patient, because now it's going to slow down, because these prosecutors are going to make sure they've got their P's and Q's right on this thing. And so but I think you will see a little bit quicker going to trial thing coming along here.
My biggest worry in these types of cases is that they're so out there. I mean, you'll start to see egos where you never would have seen an ego before. And I don't know who's the judge is that's going to be over this, if it's the same judge that's on there now, but judges are the wild card. I mean, juries are a wild card, but as we saw, like in the O.J. Simpson case, we've seen in the staircase, where the guy's wife in North Carolina, I think it is, where his wife fell down. Those judges can just totally screw a case up.
Yeah.
And
Well, they take on this celebrity status, especially
Yeah.
when it's high profile. And they lose track of what they're up there to do. It's not about a performance. It's about doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Phil, you answer this one because on a
Well,
federal
don't-
level, it's a little different.
Yeah,
don't-
detectives always ask, would you take a polygraph? The short answer is that is no. In fact, I've never been a big fan of the polygraph. The polygraph is simply a tool that I would use on occasion. And because my experience with the polygraph is that and the reason why it's not used in court is because it's a pseudoscience. It depends on the polygrapher. It depends on the types of questions that are being asked. It depends on the person that's being asked the questions. And I mean, I've had one of my cases, the polygrapher said, this guy has failed this test in a greater way than I've ever seen before. And it turned out he was not the guy. And it was only because of my investigation and what I felt like in the interview that this was not the guy. And while he was up taking the polygraph test, I was back on the computer and found the right guy. So, yeah, it was the polygraphs are used again as a tool. They can be used in the interview process to put some more pressure on that person and so forth and so on. But as a rule, there were very, very few times that I would ask a suspect, would you take a polygraph? And if I did, sometimes it was just a rhetorical question just to get their response.
Yeah. Also, with polygraphs, what everybody needs to understand about polygraphs is that the machine itself, so they tell you they're going to measure a lot, but that's actually not quite possible. You can't. There's no such thing as a lie that you can measure. You can measure physical responses to that lie. But this right here, I don't know if you could see this, but statement analysis.
Oh, yeah.
That is how a polygraph actually works. And as you see, Susan Smith is in that picture right there. And you can go through the statements that they make, and their statements tell a tremendous amount about what they've done. Not just if they say no or yes, but it's how they say it, how they try to minimize it. And so that's really where polygraphers are incredible. A monkey can run that machine, but it's the statement analysis. And you'd be so surprised at how many people they just repeat. They have the same. This is how psychologists can diagnose somebody as being bipolar or schizophrenic, or there's human beings are like cows. I mean, look at we walk. You go to a restaurant that's fast food, with that doesn't need any type of you call in before and get a reservation, and the people will just walk in there at the same exact time. We're just like cows. And when it comes to our behavior is very similar. So it's easy to put us in categories, and the statements that we make are so predictable when you're guilty a lot of the times that it's so bad that I think I said this before on the show. And they estimate around 20% of all the people who call in a homicide are actually the people who committed the homicide when they call 911, and their language is almost always the same. And so they can do statement analysis on 911 call, and they can kind of determine the potential of this person's guilt. So a polygraph, although it's dangerous because you'll say in court they passed a polygraph, the statement analysis, which is kind of what an interview, if you have a good detective, their statement analysis abilities are going to be just as good as their ability to manipulate somebody into feeling guilty and giving the truth. So statement analysis is huge. Let's do the next question here, Phil. Phil and Gil, how much blood would he have had on himself? What do you think he wore to protect himself during the murder? And how could he get in his car and not leave DNA? I mean, those are three big questions.
Well,
I think there'd be a tremendous amount of blood.
Yeah. The simple answer is he got blood on himself.
Yeah.
I don't know that other than this mask thing, and we don't know if he wore gloves and that kind of thing, but and the DNA. We don't know if he cut himself. I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of how does his DNA get on and of course the DNA on that K-bar sheath that could have been left there before he ever walked into that house. So, and we don't know if that was transferred to the car. So they're going to process the car, and that's something that will come out later in court.
And he could add clothes underneath where he took those clothes off. But between 4:17 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. when they saw the car exiting, that's only 3 minutes. So whatever he did, it would have had to been really quick to cover that up. I wonder, I mean, he was seen cleaning his car. So I wonder if one of the reasons he took that southern route instead of going the normal way home, if there's not some place out there where he stored the knife and the clothes and those types of things and ditched those things. And I would hope, and I'm sure investigators have thought about that, going there and following his route and looking for stuff. But it'd be interesting to see. But as Phil can attest, luminol, you really have to do an incredible job of cleaning to get blood, enough of the blood out of there so that they don't find
even
it.
Even if you do an incredible job of cleaning, I know a lot of people, they use the bleach thing and all that bull crap, and that doesn't even work. I mean, the old luminol stuff, they've got the Blue Star, they got the I think they used on this, they used the black, the amino black on it. So that which is only going to give you the blood. It's going to show you that there was blood in that place. I think most of these, I'm not sure if luminol does, but a lot of that destroys the DNA value to that. But it would tell them the presence of blood in the car, and if it's in places that don't make sense, other than the fact that he got in the car and he's got blood all around the driver's area, that kind of thing, then it would be just another link to the transfer.
And as you see with that, they got DNA evidence off of a fingerprint. It's hard to get rid of all that DNA evidence.
Oh yeah, that's
in your car.
There's no way. There's no way. And he's got to have taken some of that into the car with him. So I'm sure that once this thing goes to trial, we're going to see all the.
Yeah.
I think they're going to show all the evidence at that point of linking this guy to the.
But one other thing about the blood is that there was enough blood where it was seeping out of the wall onto the foundation of the house. So if that's the case, you can only imagine what the inside of the room probably looked like. And if he hit an artery, I know guys, and Phil, you've probably been there. I've never been in a circumstance like this in any of my cases, but I know guys from the NYPD who have these crazy stories where they've gone in and somebody bled completely out, and there was, an inch of blood covering the floor. So it was, because you have a tremendous amount of fluids and blood in your body, and when those seep out, it's more than what I think most people realize. How much is in there.
Well, I tell you what, I did have a case where the domestic thing, and the girl clipped her boyfriend's carotid, and it started spraying. I mean, you get that arterial spray, and it was a fine mist. It was all over the room. When he realized what had happened, it was in an apartment complex. When he realized what had happened, he ran to the apartment that he was living in with his mother. And by the time he got to that apartment, he dropped on the front stoop there, and he was dead. He had bled completely out between the bleeding he did up in the room, down the steps, across the apartment complex to his mother's door, bled completely out. It's pretty incredible.
People always like to laugh about in the military, about getting shot in the butt. Even Ferris or in Forrest Gump, he got shot in the butt and saved the guy. But that's a very dangerous shot, because if it hits your artery, that artery will suck back up into you, and they can't get to it. So and like
yeah,
Phil,
right. You know, the legs, you know, the femoral artery there on the inside of your thigh. I mean, there's some stuff there, man. You get it clipped and you're done. I mean, there's just nothing you can do.
and it's fast. It literally bleeds the life right out of a person. You can watch them try to fight back, and they just start going in slow motion, and within 15, 20 seconds they're
Right.
rendered, where they incapacitated. Let's see. Why did law enforcement state that they were looking for the occupants of the white Elantra and not occupant if he was the only one they were investigating? Bill?
That's pretty typical. I don't see that as being a big mystery. I think that the implication there is that, at least to me at the time, and I think he even made the comment, was that they believed that there may be multiple occupants of that car. And so that would just leave that's just a clue that was put out there that we're looking for the occupants of this car, plural. And I think that was more of a generic word that they used. I don't know that they were trying to be specific or tricky. I think they just, because they didn't know if it was one or two people. So yeah, we want to talk to the occupants, plural, of that car.
So let's see. I don't know if Joel's going to be able to. I'm kind of conversing with him back and forth here. His internet is just that bad. So what we'll do is we'll take a couple more questions. He may or may not be able to come back up and say anything, but if he doesn't, then we'll close it out. I guess we've been on here. Wow, time goes by fast. Almost an hour. So you want to take a couple more questions, Phil, and then go from there?
Yeah, sure. That'll take us up to about 9:30 or so. Yeah, sure.
So Lori Baker says, is it possible that when Brian said, "It's okay, I'll help you," he was talking to the dog, then he put the dog in the other bedroom and shut the door? I don't know. I thought the dog was on the 3rd floor. So I don't know.
Yeah, that was my understanding. Of course, we don't know where he was when she heard this, or who he was talking to. So
I think these are details that the sleuths love to get, and everybody loves to get wrapped up in. And I don't think that these things are going to be anything we can answer, until the court case.
It'll all come out, right? It's all going to come out. In fact, through this whole thing, I don't. I tried to not speculate. I tried to do what I've always done, is let evidence lead me where I think they're going, at least in this particular case, and that. So as far in terms of whether he's talking to the dog or not, I mean, that's something that will probably come out later. Again, another fact.
So Ryan has another question. He says, have they interrogated him yet? We spoke to this before about this, Phil, so you can kind of point out a difference there. Some former law enforcement said if that they would have hauled him in right away. Question disappeared there. But basically, when would you have done it? That's the question.
Well, if it had been right upon the arrest, I would have offered him the opportunity, as I did with every person, every suspect that I spoke with. I always give an opportunity to talk with me. And so that would have been the opportunity. You only get one bite at that apple, and that would have been the time. Now, I don't know. I mean, even though they use a SWAT team, I mean, the difference here would be that this would be a custodial interview. This would not be a non-custodial interview, because he was clearly under arrest. He would have to be Mirandized. He would have to waive those rights in order to continue the conversation with those detectives. So it doesn't, and he may have lawyered up immediately. I mean, given what his studies were and so forth and so on, the minute he knew the jig was up, he may have just said, and they offered him that. Of course, the worst question in the world that any detective can ask is, do you want to talk to me? That is not the question you need to ask, because more times than not, the answer is going to be no. You give them an opportunity. I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to sit down with you. I'll Mirandize you, so forth and so on. Explain to them the process. and get them in a mindset where they may be more agreeable to speaking with you. And of course, they can invoke a right at any point in time, whether it's custodial or non-custodial. They can terminate the interview at any point in time for any reason. So I don't. If they offered him, I would think they would have offered him the opportunity, and he declined. Would be my guess.
Yeah, I think people need to realize that they may not, that you can invoke those rights anytime through there. Once you give them the rights, you have told them that anything you say can be used against you, and that you have a right to an attorney. So once you say that, you don't have to ask them, "Do you want to talk to me?" Because
people misunderstand about when the rights are read. Look, it's not like on television. You don't walk in there and you kick the door open and boom, you start reading people's rights. That's just not the way it happens. There have been a couple of times where I've had a suspect that when I got him into custody and I had a discussion with him, I didn't ask him any questions about the case. I simply had a discussion with him. And then once I got him in the room, we got the video running, got the audio running. Then I sit down, and there's a way to read Miranda, which I would explain that to them, and then we would read Miranda. Then I'd get the waiver from them, and we would carry on that conversation. Now, there were a couple, I can only think of a couple, that invoked the right then. No, I think, do you want to waive your rights? I would ask them, and once I read them the Miranda, I would ask them, it's my understanding that you're going to intentionally, knowingly, and voluntarily waive these rights as I read them to you, or give them up so that we can continue this conversation. Is that correct? And with the exception of maybe a couple of times, they've always said yes. And so we continue on. Then I've had a couple that in the midst of it would invoke the right. I think I need, I need to talk to my lawyer, whatever this and that, and I'm invoking that right. And then if the interview ends, the other side of that is that and I would tell them this, if they want to reinitiate contact with me to continue this conversation, they can do that and just let either their attorney know or let somebody at the jail know, or they can do it right there. If I walked out and came back in and they said, look, I do want to talk to you, then what do I have to do? I have to read Miranda to them again and get that waiver, get that explicit waiver, and then move on. So
one thing I want to add to that real quick before we end is that, and you've pointed out this before, we do tremendous amount of training on this in the FBI Academy, is that there's what people believe interrogation is when you're coming in there and you're on a guy and you're like slamming the phone book on the, that's the art of interviewing and interrogating, and the legal definition of these two things. It's very closely related. It's just,
Jonathan, I can tell you, I have never conducted an interrogation. Never. Only interviews. Never conducted an interrogation. Because you're right, interrogations are a completely different animal, and you can look at the differences of what an interview is and an interrogation is already a combative situation. It's already you're already in there, and there's a negative connotation to it right off the bat. So I will tell you that in my experience, never conducted an interrogation.
And also an interview, I've gone, and I'm not lying about this, 2 hours. And sometimes in one case, it was 8 hours, but that person we had to take to the hospital because they had some issues going on. But for 8 hours, I talked to this guy before I ever asked him the specific question that I needed to ask him. So I would build rapport with these people to an excruciating level where they believe they were my friend, or they believe we had, developed a relationship.
Right.
And then I ask a question, but I can go, it was no problem for me to go 2 hours before I ask a question.
Well, that's when you have to be, I think about, I would spend as much time as it would take to build the relationship, because obviously I want them to trust me.
Right.
And so if that takes an hour and a half, then that's fine. I've never had one take 8 hours for me to get there, but I've had interviews that have gone 4 to 6 hours.
Mhm.
I've had a collective interview over a period of a couple of days that went 12 hours. But the only person in the room that knows when that time comes to start asking about the case, and it isn't just you go in there and, hey, get to know me, and then you go, okay, well, why did you do that? It's just
Right.
not that way. And that's why I refer to it as the art of the interview. There is a way, there is a formula and an attitude that you have to bring into the room, because everybody is going to be a different approach. It's going to be a different person sitting in that room, and so it's all unique to what's going on in the interview room. So establishing that relationship is most important.
And I guess we'll do one more question. And Joel, like Joel pops in and out here. Do you think there will be copycat killings now? I mean, I think copycat killings and the other term, lone wolf attacker, these are terms that have gotten popular through media, but copycat killings don't happen that often. And gang-related killings, maybe they'll choose some kind of tactic or technique that the other one did, or you have a drive-by, they're going to respond with a drive-by. But for somebody to go out and then perform these same types of killings, even people who are psychopathic killers know how difficult of a process that this probably is. And their motivation isn't to copy somebody else. Their motivation is their own little world. They're caught up in their world of their desire and their satiation. So I don't think copycat killings are probably going to happen, but you do have to realize that there are a lot of these people out there. There are
I mean, to the degree that will there be another killing of this type? Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, but that's again, this copycat thing, I think, is more it's a television media driven term than reality.
Gentlemen, I'm hopping back in. I hope you guys can hear me. Thank you so much to Detective Phil Waters, to Navy SEAL and former FBI Special Agent Jonathan Gilliam. We're going to do a live show with good audio back from STS's Global Studios in Miami, Florida. We'll come to you Tuesday, 2:30 p.m. Thank you all for tuning in. Huge thanks to Phil and Jonathan. Who needs a host when you got those two guys? Love you, America.
We just missed your presence, Joel.
I like to